This is a no-bake raspberry white chocolate cheesecake. If you're looking for the perfect no-bake dessert, you are in the right place. With a homemade raspberry sauce, a delicious graham cracker crust, a white chocolate fudge sauce, and a creamy no-bake cheesecake, topped with some fresh raspberries, it doesn't get better than this. No oven, no fuss, just pure cheesecake bliss. Now before we get into it, if you like this recipe or you're looking for weekly baking inspiration, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe for fun and inspiring weekly recipe shares. It's the best way to stay updated with all the latest bakes, tips, and sweet creations. Now, without further ado, let's get into this no-bake raspberry white chocolate cheesecake. I'm going to go through all of the ingredients with each step, but they'll also be noted in the description below. So the first thing you want to do here is make your raspberry sauce. And for this, you're going to need a cup of raspberries, fresh or frozen, a 1/4 cup of refined sugar, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, 1 tablespoon of water, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So once you have all of your ingredients, you're going to grab yourself a medium-sized pot and go ahead and pour your raspberries in along with your sugar and your 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And from here, you want to put it on a medium-low heat and just giving it a good mix here, kind of stirring it consistently. As it warms up, you want your raspberries and your sugar to kind of melt together. And while that's kind of warming up, you can go ahead and grab your cornstarch and you're going to mix it with that 1 tablespoon of water, just mixing it until it becomes a nice liquid that's fully mixed together. And then you can set that aside for a moment. Now coming back to the raspberry sauce, if you're using frozen raspberries like I did here, it is going to take probably a little bit longer for the raspberries to kind of melt and defrost with the sugar, but this process shouldn't take too long. It's only a few minutes. And you want to bring it up to a boil like this. You see that there's bubbles coming through. And once it's come to a boil, you can pour in your cornstarch mixture and just make sure you're mixing it as it's being poured in so that it doesn't clump. And just giving that a nice good mix, leaving this on the heat until it starts to thicken a bit. Usually leaving it on the heat for about 30 seconds and then removing it from the heat, adding your vanilla and mixing it in. And from here, the raspberry sauce is done. You just want to let it cool. So grabbing a medium-sized container, pouring your raspberry sauce into it and allowing it to cool or to come to room temperature at least. Now, once that's done, you want to go ahead and make your cheesecake crust. So for this crust, you are going to need 120 grams of graham cracker crumbs. These I just made out of the graham cracker cookies and put them in a blender for a little bit until they become crumbs. You're also going to need 2 tablespoons of sugar, or brown sugar to be more precise. You can also use white sugar if you want, but I use brown sugar. You'll also need 6 tablespoons of melted butter and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon just to give a little bit more flavor to this crust. So once you have all of your ingredients, you're going to grab your graham cracker crumbs, pour in your brown sugar and your cinnamon, and just combine this together until it's all nice and well mixed. And just making sure that the brown sugar isn't clumping too much. You don't want big clumps. Small clumps are okay, but big clumps might not be good. And then from there, you can go ahead and pour in your melted butter and just combine this all together until it's well and combined and a consistent texture throughout. The melted butter is what's going to keep everything together in this crust. And from here, this crust is ready to be formed. So in honor of Valentine's Day, I used heart molds here, but you can also use cupcake molds if you don't have these. It will make 12 mini cheesecakes. So you can go ahead and pour in about 1 to 2 heaping tablespoons of your crust into each mold. And once it's all poured in, you can just go ahead and flatten it, kind of pressing gently at the bottom to create that crust for the cheesecake. I'm using a rubber spatula here, but you can also use a shot glass or any kind of thing that has a flat kind of bottom on it and just pressing down firmly. And if you can, you kind of want to try to get the edges to be a little bit higher than the middle of the cheesecake crust, just because we will be pouring in that white chocolate fudge sauce on top of it. And you want to try to kind of keep it inside of the cake crust. If not, it's not a big deal. It will taste just as good. So once that's done, you can pop these in the freezer while we make the white chocolate fudge sauce. Now for this white chocolate fudge sauce, you are going to need 100 grams of white chocolate, 2.5 tablespoons of warm, heavy cream, you can't really see it here, but half a tablespoon of corn syrup. This is going to help keep that white chocolate fudge sauce soft and fudgy. And a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now, once you have all of your ingredients gathered, you can go ahead and grab your white chocolate and add your corn syrup on top of it. You're also going to want to add your vanilla as well. You don't need to mix it at this point. Just set that aside for a moment and warm up your heavy cream in the microwave for about 30 to 40 seconds. And then you can go ahead and pour your warmed up heavy cream on top of the white chocolate and just let it sit there for a moment to allow the warm heavy cream to kind of melt the white chocolate a little bit. And once you've let it sit for like a minute, you can go ahead and kind of mix it. Now it's very possible that the chocolate will not fully melt at this point, so you might need to put it back in the microwave for a few seconds. I did at this point because the white chocolate wasn't melting, so just putting it in the microwave for like 5 to 10 seconds. It really doesn't need that much, and you want to be careful that you're not burning your chocolate, so be very careful with that. Just popping it in the microwave for 5 to 10 seconds and then mixing it until all of the chocolate is nice and melted and combined with everything else. And you can see here the chocolate is melting, and I only put this in the microwave for 5 to 10 seconds just once, and just keep mixing until it becomes this nice silky texture. Now, once that white chocolate fudge sauce is done, you can go ahead and grab your cake crust molds and just pour a heaping tablespoon of that white chocolate on top of the cheesecake crust. Again, trying to be careful to not let the white chocolate fudge sauce hit the edges of the mold. If it does, it's not that big of a deal. It's just very likely that it will kind of melt out of the cheesecake and seep out of the sides whenever you're ready to eat it, which is fine. It has no impact on the actual taste. It's more about the aesthetic. And from there, you can go ahead and pop these in the freezer while we make the no-bake cheesecake. So for this no-bake cheesecake, you are going to need 450 grams of cream cheese at room temperature and softened. 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, ideally real maple syrup if you have it, but if not, that's okay. Half a cup of powdered sugar. 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. 3/4 cups of cold heavy cream. And I didn't get it on video here, but 3 tablespoons of the raspberry sauce. And half a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Now, once you've got all your ingredients, you want to go ahead and grab a medium-sized bowl and go ahead and add your room temperature cream cheese to it. Before we do anything more than this, you just want to make sure you're beating your cream cheese a little bit, just softening it up, making sure it's nice and creamy, because you don't want it to be clumpy when you're adding in your other ingredients with it. So just whipping it manually by hand and beating it until it's nice and velvety and creamy. Now, once that's done, you can go ahead and add in your lemon juice, the maple syrup, and your vanilla extract. And you can go ahead and give this a nice mix, just going gently because the cream cheese is still a bit stiff compared to the other liquids, but just giving this a nice mix until it's well and combined. And I promise it will come together. I know it looks really clumpy right now, but it does come together really well once you give it a nice mix and just beating it together until it becomes really creamy and almost kind of fluffy. Something a little bit like this. So this is a bit of the texture that you're looking for at this point. And from here, you can go ahead and add in your powdered sugar. Ideally using a sifter to add in the sugar, just so that the sugar doesn't clump as much with this cream cheese mixture, because it does tend to do that without a sifter. And then just slowly and gently mixing in the sugar into your cream cheese mixture. I say slowly and gently so that the sugar doesn't kind of fly everywhere. And you just want to mix this until, again, it becomes this really nice, creamy, kind of light, velvety texture. And once it's fully combined, it'll look a little bit something like this. And once that's done, you can set this mixture aside just for a moment. You want to go ahead and grab yourself a large bowl, pouring in your cold heavy cream, and you want to whip this until you get stiff peaks. So usually this just takes a few minutes, and this is what's going to give it that airy kind of texture, kind of lighten the texture of the cheesecake with this whipped cream. So you just want to whip this until you get stiff peaks. It'll look a little bit something like this once you get those stiff peaks. And from here, we're going to combine our whipped cream into the cheesecake or cream cheese mixture. So grabbing your cream cheese mixture and just mixing it at increments at a time, because you don't want to whip all of the air out of the whipped cream. So I would suggest maybe adding in 1/4 of your whipping cream at a time and just gently folding it into the cream cheese mixture. As you can see, it's already kind of starting to lighten up that filling. And you just want to do this until all of your whipping cream has been added to the cream cheese mixture to make that no-bake cheesecake base. And once it's all combined, it'll look a little bit something like this, really light and velvety, but also super creamy. And from here, you want to split that cheesecake batter in two, and you're going to want to add your raspberry sauce in one half of it. So adding 3 tablespoons of the raspberry sauce that we made earlier and just combining it into the half of this cheesecake batter. Again, trying to be a little bit gentle with the cheesecake batter to not whip out all of the air from the whipped cream, and just combining this until it's all nice and well combined together and a consistent texture. Now, once that's done, the cheesecakes are ready to be finished here. This part is optional, but I used a piping bag to pipe on the no-bake cheesecake on top of the crusts. This was just easier. If you don't have a piping bag, you can also use a Ziploc bag and just cut the tip off. But if you want to spoon it into the molds directly, that's okay too. It just might be a little bit more challenging, but it will work as well. But if you're using the piping bags or a Ziploc bag, just go ahead and place your no-bake cheesecake inside of the piping bag. And simple enough, then it's ready to just pipe it into the molds directly. So grabbing your crusts and your white chocolate fudge sauce from the freezer, and you can go ahead and just do one layer of the raspberry cheesecake on top of the crust, just creating a nice even layer. And just repeating this process with each of your cheesecake molds. And once you've put that initial layer of the raspberry cheesecake, you can go ahead and grab your plain cheesecake and just piping on a layer on top of the plain cheesecake. And from here, you can go ahead and grab a piece of plastic wrap and just pushing down gently on each of the cheesecakes. This is going to help just flatten it out and create a nice even layer on each of the cheesecakes, but also protect from freezer burn if you are putting these in the freezer. Now, if you're using cupcake molds, you actually probably don't need to put these in the freezer. You can just pop them in the fridge to set for a few hours. But if you're using molds like I am here that need to be popped out, pop these in the freezer overnight or for a few hours until they harden. And once they've set in the freezer, grab yourself a piece of parchment paper and a container to put these in. Remove the plastic wrap from the top of each of these cheesecakes and just remove them from the molds. Again, if you're using a mold like I am here, definitely put these in the freezer because they are too soft to pop them out. They will get absolutely destroyed if you just let them set in the fridge. So just popping these out and placing them on that piece of parchment paper or that container that you have set out for each of these cheesecakes. These did get a little bit of an edge of freezer burn on them. I don't know if it's just because of my freezer, but you can just go ahead and kind of like on the edges, just wipe it off. And once they're all removed, you can go ahead and place these in the fridge in a container. and let these soften in the fridge. It'll probably take a few hours, or you can leave them overnight as well. And once these have defrosted in the fridge, you can go ahead and pour some of that raspberry sauce on top of these cheesecakes. And you can even go ahead and grab some fresh raspberries and put them on top. And there you have the most delicious no-bake raspberry white chocolate cheesecakes. These are absolutely delicious. If you try this recipe, let me know in the comments. If you like this recipe, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.